Being taken hostage was sort of a taboo subject among sailors. Anything, even shipwreck, is better. Those are the words of a captain who knew the dangers of the open sea better than anyone. A captain whose story we'll share in today's video. But in his story, and in the others we'll uncover today, it wasn't the sailors who had to fear for their lives. In these stories, the Somali pirates weren't the predators, they were the prey. Here's what happens when you mess with the wrong ship, one that belongs to or is protected by none other than the United States Navy. Spoiler alert, the lesson is swift, brutal, and unforgettable. And for some, it was the last lesson they ever learned. It's April 8th, 2009. The Maersk Alabama is a towering 508-foot-long container ship cutting through the waters of the Somali basin. It's bound for Mombasa, Kenya, with stops in Djibouti along the way. But this isn't just any cargo vessel, it's a critical lifeline, carrying over 400 containers with around 8,000 metric tons of food aid from US aid, including over 5 tons destined for the United Nations World Food Programme. The ship's mission is a noble one, delivering supplies to starving refugees across East Africa. But as the ship sails through the treacherous waters off the Somali coast, it's also crossing into pirate-infested territory, a region where ships are prime targets for hijackings, ransoms, and violent extortion. Captain Richard Phillips is at the helm. With 30 years of experience navigating dangerous waters, Captain Phillips is no stranger to the ever-present threat of piracy, but he's not the one to panic. When he boarded the Maersk Alabama just a few days earlier in Salalah, Oman, he immediately noticed something troubling: lax security, doors left unlocked, pirate cages unlatched, a stark contrast to the vigilance he knew was essential when sailing near the Somali coast. So Captain Phillips had warned his crew to stay sharp. After all, they had trained for this: the anti-piracy drills, the small arms training, the basic safety courses, the whole 9 yards. Yet despite all these preparations, the Maersk Alabama crew couldn't have predicted the storm that was about to hit. After all, no ship registered under the US flag has been successfully seized by pirates since the early 1800s. The last time pirates had managed such a feat, 1815, during the Second Barbary War, a time when US warships were sailing the Mediterranean to confront the notorious pirates of North Africa. But on April 8, 2009, this nearly 2-century-long streak was shattered. As the Maersk Alabama sailed just 280 miles southeast of Ail, Somalia, a hotspot for pirate activity, the crew had been warned. However, Captain Phillips kept the course, determined not to be intimidated by the threat. By 7:35 a.m., the unthinkable had already happened. The pirates were on board. The warning had come earlier, sometime between 6 and 7 a.m. "Boat approaching, 3.1 miles out astern," came the urgent call from the bridge. The alarm blared, sharp and jarring, as 2 pirate skiffs appeared on the radar. They were racing toward the Maersk Alabama, cutting through the waves with alarming speed. As the vessels drew closer, 4 men could be seen in the lead boat, armed with AK-47s and ready to fight. In a desperate attempt to ward them off, Captain Richard Phillips ordered flares to be fired. The bright bursts of light were meant as a warning. This ship isn't an easy target, but the pirates were unfazed. The seas were rough, and the ship rocked under the waves, but the attackers held their course, even as fire hoses blasted in their direction. It was clear they had no intention of turning back. And then at 7:35 a.m., the pirates were on deck. It had taken them barely 5 minutes to board, and just like that, the crew of the Maersk Alabama was trapped. Captain Phillips remained calm amidst the chaos, his mind racing, but his actions steady. He immediately tried to engage with the pirates, offering them water and cigarettes. It was a move designed to ease the tension, to buy time, to defuse the situation before it spiraled out of control. And it worked to an extent. The pirates' demeanor shifted, aggression became calculation, and they began asking questions. What's the nationality of this ship? Who's on board? But they knew this ship had value. They knew a ship from the US, flying the American flag, was a prize. A lottery jackpot. That's what a Somali pirate called seizing a ship from a Western country, because according to him, no one will come to the rescue of a third world ship. But the Somali pirates targeting the Maersk Alabama didn't count on who would come to the rescue this time. Only the Navy SEALs, the world's most elite and lethal special force, and their involvement was no jackpot for the Somali pirates. It was their undoing, but we aren't there yet. For now, Captain Phillips is trying to protect his crew by guiding the pirates toward empty areas of the ship while his men hide. He was trying to protect his people and buy time for any sort of rescue. But the situation was growing more dangerous by the minute. By 3:30 p.m., the situation had escalated beyond a simple hijacking. The crew had already managed to capture the pirate leader, turning the tables on their attackers. Below deck, they held him as a bargaining chip, hoping to force the remaining pirates into a standoff. Captain Phillips, using his negotiation skills, stalled for time, knowing every passing minute increased the chance of rescue. As the hours dragged on, the pirates grew restless. By 7 p.m., they were ready to leave, but not without a prize. They demanded a ransom, and Phillips handed over $30,000 in cash from the ship's safe. Then came a fateful moment. The crew attempted to exchange the pirate leader for Phillips, hoping to end the standoff peacefully, but the pirates had other plans. The moment Phillips stepped onto the lifeboat, the pirates double-crossed them. There was no deal. The lifeboat sped away from the Maersk Alabama, with Phillips now their hostage. But why was he buying all this time? For the US Navy, of course. You see, the Maersk Alabama's crew did more than hide, they fought back. As the pirates boarded, Chief Engineer Mike Perry took control of the engine, shutting down all systems and plunging the ship into darkness. Perry, armed with a knife, even managed to capture the pirates' leader, Abduwali Muse, after a tense chase through the dark engine room. The crew would later try to exchange Muse for their captain, who was eventually taken by the pirates on their lifeboat. While the hijacking quickly escalated into a full-blown hostage situation, it's fortunate the US Navy had already been alerted. The USS Bainbridge, a guided missile destroyer, was en route, joined by the USS Haley-Burton, equipped with helicopters and surveillance gear. The Navy SEALs were also called in to handle this high-stakes hostage situation. In other words, the rescue operation was already set into motion. On April 9th, the day after the Maersk Alabama was hijacked, the USS Bainbridge reached the vessel. As the Navy arrived, Captain Phillips was still in the hands of the pirates, and the ship was stuck in a tense standoff. But things quickly took a turn when Captain Phillips attempted to escape on the morning of April 10th. He jumped overboard, hoping for a chance to evade his captors, but his escape was short-lived. The pirates quickly recaptured him, and the Navy's hope of resolving the crisis through negotiation was now running out of time. By April 11th, things were getting critical. The Navy realized that it would take more direct action. Luckily, they would be joined by SEAL Team 6, the elite counter-terrorism unit, on the same day. This is the same unit that would take out the notorious Osama bin Laden 2 years later. But on this fateful day in 2009, SEAL Team 6, armed with .30 caliber sniper rifles and other specialized equipment, arrived to deal with the Somali pirates. The pirates, now running low on supplies and fuel, reluctantly agreed to let the Navy attach a tow cable to their lifeboat. While the pirates said the tether was to keep the lifeboat steady in rough seas, the Navy knew it was the perfect setup for a rescue operation. As the lifeboat was pulled closer to the USS Bainbridge, the pirates were within sniper range. The SEALs took up positions on the fantail, their sniper rifles ready in case the moment for action arrived. By the early morning hours of April 11th, the pirates' desperation was growing. Having run out of fuel, they started drifting toward the Somali coast, hoping to escape or make it harder for the Navy to intervene. But the Navy maintained a constant, watchful presence. The pirates' demands were simple. They wanted a ransom for Phillips' safe return. The amount? $2 million, not exactly pocket change. But then again, considering that by this point, pirates had raked in tens of millions of dollars in ransoms, it wasn't exactly a shocking number. The Maersk Alabama was actually the 6th ship to be attacked in a single week, so these pirates were definitely aiming to make themselves millionaires. But these pirates weren't about to strike it rich quite as easily. For most of them, what was supposed to be their big payday would end up being their final day. What sealed their fate was pointing an AK-47 at Captain Phillips. That was all the signal the SEALs needed. In perfect synchronization, 3 snipers fired simultaneously from the fantail of the USS Bainbridge. All 3 bullets found their marks, eliminating the pirates in an instant. The only pirate to survive was Musa, the leader who had been captured earlier in a failed hostage exchange. By the time the snipers fired, he was already aboard the Bainbridge, having surrendered and requested medical treatment. As for Captain Phillips, the nightmare he'd endured for 5 grueling days was finally over. Unscathed, he was quickly taken aboard the USS Bainbridge for medical evacuation. The bodies of the 3 deceased pirates were later handed over to Somali authorities, while Musa was taken into custody. He was placed in the USS Boxer's brig, a floating prison, before being flown to the US to face trial. Musa's legal team tried to claim he was a juvenile, alleging he was just 15 or 16 years old during the hijacking, but the court ruled against it. In the end, Musa admitted to being 18, and the court proceeded to try him as an adult, sentencing him to 33 years and 9 months in an American prison in February 2011. But before Musa's story received an epilogue, Captain Phillips told his own. In 2010, he released a memoir, A Captain's Duty, offering his side of the harrowing ordeal. The memoir would eventually serve as the blueprint for the 2013 film Captain Phillips, starring Tom Hanks as the title character. Talk about a legacy that keeps growing. First a book, then a movie, and now a viral video? Fingers crossed. The owners of the Maersk Alabama at the time, Maersk Line, also tried to keep the legacy alive by donating the bullet-marked 5-ton fiberglass lifeboat, where Captain Phillips was held captive, to the National Navy UDT SEAL Museum in Fort Pierce, Florida. Maersk Line, a powerhouse in the shipping world, is the second largest container shipping company globally. This Danish giant operates 679 vessels which carried around 24 million ton equivalent units, or TEUs for short, in 2023 alone. One of these vessels was the Maersk Virginia, which, believe it or not, almost suffered the same fate as the Maersk Alabama less than 2 months after its hijacking. It seems the Somali pirates really had their sights set on the Maersk ships. But as we said, the keyword here is almost, so let's see how this close call turned out. It's May 22, 2009. The Maersk Virginia is cruising through the Gulf of Aden, another infamous hotspot for Somali pirates. At the time, the Virginia is en route to Salalah, Oman, carrying its cargo in the protected waters of a security corridor. The Maersk Virginia is a 4,300 TEU container ship, which means it's carrying a serious load of goods that could attract all the wrong crowds. And they did. As Maersk Virginia is cruising in broad daylight, a group of pirates, fresh off a failed hijacking attempt on the Maria K, a Greek bulk carrier, set their sights on the American cargo ship. These pirates had fired weapons and grenades at the Maria K, but when that failed, they decided to take their chances with the Virginia. Now here's where the plot thickens. At around 10 to 11 a.m. that morning, the pirates launched their assault, but they're in for a rude awakening. The crew of the Maersk Virginia managed to send out a distress signal before it was too late, and the cavalry came charging in. But this time it wasn't the US Navy riding to the rescue. No, this time it was the Royal Canadian Navy stepping in to save the day. The HMCS Winnipeg, a Canadian warship stationed nearby, had been patrolling the area as part of an international effort to curb piracy. So when the distress call came in, the ship was ready. Its time had come. Within minutes, 3 Canadian naval helicopters were airborne, scanning the area where the pirates had launched their assault. The clock was ticking, but the Canadian team didn't miss a beat. As the helicopters hovered overhead, the pirates' bravado quickly evaporated. They realized their plan was unraveling fast. Of course, it didn't help that another helicopter from the Italian Navy joined the fray, tightening the noose. Faced with the overwhelming presence of military force, the pirates gave up their attempt to hijack the Maersk Virginia and tossed their weapons overboard, essentially surrendering. Talk about a quick exit strategy. But it wasn't over just yet. As the pirates abandoned their skiff, they found no escape. Italian Navy sailors boarded the pirates' boat, securing the vessel and bringing the situation to a close. And just like that, the Maersk Virginia had dodged the bullet, with all 19 crew members, all US citizens, safe and sound. But this close call didn't sit well with everyone. Back in the US, tensions had already been rising over how American ships were being protected, or rather, not being protected. So naturally, the incident really ruffled some feathers in Washington. The fact that 2 US ships from the same fleet had been attacked so closely together had ignited serious questions. Was the government doing enough to protect its assets? Was the US military doing its part to safeguard a fleet that carried US government cargo, especially in such a high-risk region? It was clear that the mere instructions to change course or travel at high speeds weren't enough when pirates were heavily armed and organized. Elijah E. Cummings, the chairman of the House Subcommittee on the Coast Guard and Maritime Transportation at the time, didn't mince words. He questioned the adequacy of the Coast Guard Security Directive, which had been issued just weeks earlier. Why is it that the best our nation appears to have to offer our merchant mariners at this time is instructions on the steps they should take to protect themselves, he asked. This was a punch to the gut for many, implying that the US officials were leaving American ships to fend for themselves in dangerous waters. And those waters were about to get even more dangerous, because not even a year later, pirates started engaging warships. Their reasoning wasn't entirely clear. Perhaps they thought taking on military vessels would give them an edge, maybe even give them the kind of ransom they'd only dreamed of. But what is clear is that in April of 2010, they picked the wrong warship to mess with. Because at the end of the entire ordeal, the headlines didn't read, "Pirates capture USS Ashland," but "USS Ashland captures pirates." Let's take a closer look at how this bold move by the pirates turned into a disastrous miscalculation, one that 6 pirates barely lived to regret. It's April 10th, 2010. The USS Ashland, a landing ship of the US Navy, is on a routine operation in the Gulf of Aden, 330 miles off the coast of Djibouti. Yes, that Gulf of Aden, a hotspot for piracy for years, and this incident was just the latest in a string of attacks. Over the previous 120 days, pirates had been increasingly targeting military vessels. Before USS Ashland, USS Nicholas, a guided missile frigate, and USS Farragut, a guided missile destroyer, had been engaged in similar confrontations. The USS McFowl, another destroyer, had captured 10 pirates in a previous rescue mission. It soon became clear that whatever the pirates' goal was in these cases, picking a fight with heavily armed warships wasn't their smartest move. So let's go back and join the USS Ashland in the Gulf of Aden. It's the early hours of the morning, around 5 a.m. local time, and the Ashland is just doing her job in these dangerous waters. But then a pirate skiff, manned by 6 suspected pirates, spots the ship and opens fire with small arms. These pirates reportedly thought the Ashland was just another merchant vessel, an easy target for a quick heist. Big mistake. The Ashland, well equipped for defense, didn't just take the shots lying down, it returned fire, and not just a little. 2 rounds from her Mark 38 Mod 2 25mm gun, and the pirate's skiff was aflame. The pirates quickly realized they'd bitten off more than they could chew, right around the time they were targeted by a weapon that could rip through steel like a hot knife through butter. They simply didn't stand a chance against the Navy. The pirate skiff was engulfed in flames, and the crew had no choice but to abandon the ship, drifting helplessly in the water. A close call, but not for the Ashland. The real danger had shifted squarely onto the pirates. Within moments, the Ashland deployed her rigid-hull inflatable boats to rescue the stranded pirates. No harm came to the USS Ashland, and not a single crew member was injured. Once the pirates were safely on board, they were thoroughly checked, and with weapons no longer in their possession, they were taken into custody. There will be no more threats from them. The 6 captured pirates were transported back to the US, where they would face charges for piracy, conspiracy, and other serious crimes. Fast forward to November 29, 2010, and the first of the pirates was sentenced to 30 years in prison. The sentence came just after the US Navy's careful and relentless pursuit of justice. USS Attorney Neil H. McBride made a powerful statement during the sentencing. Piracy is a growing threat throughout the world, and today's sentence demonstrates that the United States will hold modern-day pirates accountable in US courtrooms. Of course, this only applies to pirates who live to see the courtroom. Because when you attack US vessels, whether it's a merchant ship, a military escort, or a warship, you're not just picking a fight with the crew, you're challenging a force that will act if it has to. The US Navy doesn't go looking for these battles, but if you force its hand, you might not live to face the consequences. So there you have it, 3 dramatic confrontations with US ships, each showing how pirates miscalculated their targets. When you think about these high-stakes confrontations, do you think the pirates really understand who they're messing with, or are they just too desperate to care? And what about other nations? Have you heard of any non-US vessels that were attacked and fought back just as fiercely? Share them with us in the comments section below.